we're back in the life of Joseph, and no one better to break that down than our big man Hutch. So everybody, let's welcome Hutch up today. Let's rock and roll and do this thing out, baby.
Thanks, Ryan. You know, guys, it's good to be back. I was out last week. It was Parents' Weekend, and so our daughter just began grad school at Florida State University, so we went down there to be with her and had a good time, and actually had a win at the football stadium, so that was great. But Ron was gracious enough to switch teaching times with me. And so I decided I'm just going to watch the teaching from last week. And I did that yesterday. And Ron did such a great job. And by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but we do have a YouTube channel. So if you miss any of the teaching on Friday mornings, you can stay up with that. It's usually out by Monday or Tuesday of the next week, so you can follow along with it. Maybe something really speaks to you, and you can pass that YouTube address on to somebody else. It'll be a blessing to them as well. I personally got a text last week from the message that I taught 2 weeks ago from a good friend of mine. I hadn't seen in a while. And he said, just finished watching that and listening to it and was very, very thankful. I'm in a pit right now that I thought I would never be in, and it was what I needed to hear at the time. So you never know what a blessing what we're doing here on Friday morning might be, as it's multiplied over and over and over and over again. But to be honest with you, Ron did such a great job last week teaching on Job, and he's such a gifted teacher, such rich material in there. I kind of feel this morning like the cross-eyed discus thrower who, he really never set any records, but he always kept the crowd alert. And that's what I hope to do this morning, is to keep the crowd alert, keep you awakened and ready to go. So as Ryan said, we're picking back up again in our series on Joseph from pit to pinnacle. And so be finding your way to Genesis chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39, we're going to be beginning at verse number 1, so it should be pretty easy to find. The Genesis is the very first book of your Bible. Chapter 39 follows chapter 38, so if you get to chapter 40, just go back one and you'll be able to get there real quick. You know, I heard recently about a newlywed couple. I mean, they were just passionately in love with each other, and they had just gotten married. A few weeks later, this sailor gets his orders. And lo and behold, he is going to have to ship out for 2 years to an isolated, remote Pacific island. And so he's just heartbroken over this. And so there they are, they're saying their goodbyes. He's just crazy in love with this woman, but he has to leave, and he gets to his new position there on that deserted island. It wasn't deserted, but it was an island off by itself. And he writes his bride a letter, and he says to her, honey, I just love you so much, and I miss you so much. I don't know how I'm going to be able to make it these next 2 years. Would you pray for me? I really think I need a hobby. I mean, the native girls here are so young and so beautiful. The temptation is all around me. Just pray for me. And he sent that letter off. Not too long after that, he got a little package with a note in it and a harmonica. And it was from his wife. She said, honey, why don't you learn how to play this harmonica to keep your mind focused and off of the temptation that's all around you? So the 2 years are up. He comes back home. They meet at the airport. They embrace. He picks her up off of the ground. He's kissing her and he's hugging her. And he looks at her. He says, darling, you are so ravishingly beautiful. I cannot wait to get home and make mad, passionate love to you. She says, wait a second, big guy. Let's hear you play that harmonica first. Temptation. What do you do when temptation comes knocking? That's where we find ourselves today in our journey in the study of the life of Joseph. Genesis chapter 39. I'm going to give you 3 thoughts this morning. We're going to take a break, go to the tables with some questions, and hopefully have some lively discussion, come back and give you 3 truths about temptation. But beginning in verse 1, chapter 39. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. Now, you'll remember from a couple of weeks ago, Joseph was a young man who grew up in a dysfunctional family. His mom passed away at a very early age. His dad was sort of disengaged, very busy guy. So he ends up being raised really by 3 stepmothers. He has a younger brother whose their mom died in childbirth, and so Benjamin was his younger brother. But his older brothers really, really hated him. His father coddled him because that was his favorite wife, Rachel. And so he loved and really let everyone know how special Joseph was to him. And that didn't make things easy for Joseph. He gave him that coat of many colors, the bedazzled cloak, if you will. And then one day he sends him out at the age of 17 to just simply check up on his brothers who were tending sheep. And as he begins to approach them, they see him in a distance. They begin to strategize. We're going to kill this guy. We're going to get rid of this problem once and for all. We'll make it look like it was an accident. Dad will never know any better. Finally, cooler heads prevail. And instead of killing him, they decide to make it into a profit option. And they sell him to these Ishmaelite traders who were going down to Egypt to peddle their wares. And so they sell them to the Ishmaelite traders for a mere measly 20 pieces of silver. They then take him on down to Egypt. And look at verse number 2. And we read a phrase here that we see multiple times as we study the life of Joseph, and that is this: the Lord was with Joseph. He's 17 years old. His mom has been gone for years. He has been separated from his father, from his homeland, from all that he ever knew growing up. He is taken to a foreign land. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't know the customs. He doesn't know the geography. He doesn't know a soul. Carried down in a cage, put on a block for auction. But the Lord was with Joseph. And he became a successful man. Really, we could study Genesis chapter 39 and ascribe from it principles of success, but that's not our assignment today. Our assignment today is what to do when temptation comes, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. Now notice this. His master saw that the Lord was with him. He's a young man. But yet there was something in Joseph's life that caught the attention of this Egyptian master, who could see that God was with him, was prospering him because of Joseph. So his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, that is his master, and he attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. Imagine this. You are such a successful, busy person. By the way, Potiphar is a high government official in Egypt. He is the ranking official underneath of Pharaoh in charge of making sure that the laws of the land are kept. In many ways, he was the executioner, if you will. He had the power of life and death in his words and in his hand. And Joseph comes into his home. And over a period of time, and that's something you and I need to understand. Joseph is 17 when he begins this journey, but some biblical historians tell us that he was in Potiphar's house maybe 10 to 11 years serving as a servant. So we don't know exactly how long this takes place here. It may have been a month, it may have been 6 months, it may have been a year, it may have been 4 years, it may have been 5 years or 10 years, we don't know. But it was over an extended period of time, and I want you to see that. But he trusted Joseph so much that he gave him everything he had. He put him in charge of his money. You got to trust somebody to give them access to every bank account that you have. He trusted him to lead all of the other servants of his home. You got to trust somebody because they're representing you. And it says here in this text that that Potiphar trusted him so much that he didn't concern himself with anything except for what he had for dinner. And as men, we understand that, right? You can have everything, but when it comes to dinner, I'm choosing what I want. You're not picking it for me, okay? And that's the picture we see here. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had. This Egyptian is reaping the benefits of Joseph being in his service. I want you to see that. Keep that in mind, okay? So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food that he ate. He didn't lose a minute of sleep. He didn't lose a minute of time worrying. Everything was under Joseph's control. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and that particular phrase only appears 3 times in our Old Testament. So I say that to say this. He's a good-looking dude. The thing about good-looking dudes is we can appreciate it, but we don't like it, do we? That's most of us. I don't know about you, you know. Maybe you think you are that good-looking dude, and it very well may be. But it says here, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. He was a strikingly, stunningly handsome man. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes at Joseph and said, "Lie with me." Remember, Joseph now is probably in his 20s somewhere, maybe early to mid-20s. He's a single guy. He's a good-looking single guy. He's a good-looking single guy in a foreign land where very few by this time people know him. And his boss's wife starts making googly eyes at him and starts in a forward way, extending him an invitation, come and lie with me. But, verse 8 says, he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife." And then notice this next question. And this helps us to understand Joseph's character. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Guys, I want you to stop for a second and think about this. Joseph didn't have Genesis 39 to read. He didn't even have Genesis 50 to know how it was all going to turn out. Joseph didn't have a good church to go to on Sunday. He didn't have a Bible to read. He didn't have a church to go to. He didn't have a men's group to meet with on Friday mornings to sit around the table and to do life together with. And yet he was so passionately in love with God that he knew that if he did this sin, it was going to ultimately be against God, as all sin is. You see, temptation is a solicitation to do evil, to disobey God. We see it from the very first pages of Genesis with Adam and Eve. We see it all throughout the scriptures. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph, notice these next 3 words, day after day. She kept at it. She didn't give him a break. It wasn't a one-time offer. She was whispering in his ear. She was casting eyes. She was dressing seductively. She was saddling up alongside of him at every opportunity to entice him to sin. And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. You know what that meant? Whenever he saw her and he knew she was there, he got out of there. And that's important for us to understand. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, and you know what? She may have been laying a net for him. She gave everybody the day off because she knew that Joseph was a faithful man. He was going to be there on time to do his job. So she emptied out the house. She caught him by his garment. She snuck up on him, a stealth attack, saying, lie with me. He didn't argue with her. He didn't stop and consider, you know what? Nobody will ever know. I could get away with this. There's not another soul in the house. Very few, if any, people know me here. I'm in a foreign land. She's a beautiful, desirous woman, and she wants me. This could be the start of something good. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. He didn't waste any time. Literally, he ran out into the street. Let me give you 3 thoughts here real quick before we go to the tables. This is practical application stuff we can take from Joseph's encounter with this woman that you and I need to apply. Number 1, be mindful of where you're vulnerable. Be mindful of where you are vulnerable. Do you realize that you have vulnerabilities? It's hard for us to say that as men, isn't it? I mean, we all think we're Superman. We think we can stand up under anything and everything and we'll be okay, but there's weak spots, there's chinks in the armor. You need to know that. And if you don't think that you have any weak spots or chinks in the armor, you need to find a good friend, maybe somebody sitting across the table from you today that will look at you and help to point out the blind spots in your life, because everyone has blind spots, and it's those blind spots that Satan loves to come and attack. So be mindful of where you are vulnerable. Number 2, be watchful for Satan's or for temptation's game plan. Be watchful for temptation's game plan. Now, you guys are going to have to listen faster, okay? In order to break this down, I want us to go over to the New Testament, but I'm not going to ask you to turn there because we don't have a whole lot of time. But I want to give you temptation's game plan. You know what? Unfortunately for me, I am a Washington Redskins fan. I grew up just outside of D.C., and I went through those great years with Joe Gibbs and Joe Theismann and John Riggins. And I remember when John Riggins was the running back, and they went to the Super Bowl. They did a play called the counter tray. That's where the right guard and the right tackle would pull and go around, and they would lead John Riggins to the side. And they would start running this play early in the game. And John would get 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards. Second quarter, he's getting 4 yards and 5 yards. Third quarter, he's getting 6 and 7 yards. By the time the fourth quarter came around, he was wearing them down, and he was popping them every once in a while for 40, 50 yards. And every time he would break one free, the stadium would do the do the diesel sound, man, because that was his nickname. And he was running down the field. He was scoring touchdowns. Did it in the Super Bowl. The thing about the counter tray is that everybody knew it was coming, but they were so good at it, nobody could stop it. And that's the same thing with temptation. Satan has a game plan that is so simple, but he is so good at carrying it out that it's hard for us to stop it. So let me give you some insights that I am learning about temptation's game plan. Now, we have to go over to the New Testament. John chapter 3 and verse 16, the most beloved verse in Scripture, says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life." The same writer, John, under the inspiration of the same Holy Spirit, also wrote 1 John. And in 1 John chapter 2 and in verse 15 and in 16, he gives us some tremendous insight. 1 John 2, verses 15 and 16. Listen to this. Listen to what he says. He says, do not love the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. So let me ask you a question this morning. Put your thinking cap on, okay? John chapter 3, God so loved the world. 1 John chapter 2, do not love the world or the things that are in the world. Which is it? Are we to love the world? Or are we to not love the world? Well, it depends on what the definition of the word world is. In John chapter 3, the definition of the word world is people. For God so loved people that he gave his one and only Son, that he would live a perfect and a sinless life, die a substitutionary and atoning death on Calvary's cross for our sin. The word world in 1 John chapter 2 is talking about the value system of the world in which we live. So when you understand that, it helps us to understand what John is saying. He says there are three components of Satan's game plan. First of all is the lust of the flesh. Write this down. The temptation to feel. The lust of the flesh is the temptation to feel. I want to feel good. Oftentimes, we associate the lust of the flesh just with sex, and sex does feel good. It fits into that category. But there are a lot of other things that feel good as well. For years and years, I preached 3 sermons every Sunday morning. And for one of those years in the midst, I preached 1 sermon on Saturday night, 3 on Sunday morning. My wife and those close to me were looking at me and telling me how much of a toll this was taking on me. I didn't see it until I stopped preaching that Saturday night service. I don't know if you know much about speaking publicly, but it takes a lot of energy out of you. Some people say that preaching a 30-minute sermon is equivalent of working 30 hours of physical labor. It's the same wear and tear. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you this. On Sunday afternoon, after having preached all weekend long, I sat in my recliner and I was absolutely drained and exhausted, emotionally, physically. I was drained in every way. I'm an introverted person. I had been spending the entire weekend giving out and hanging out and being with people. I needed to have my batteries recharged. And so I wanted to feel good. And what happens is when you want to feel good because you are drained physically, emotionally, mentally, in all of those ways, you could look for feeling good in food, in sports, in sitting back as a couch potato and doing nothing. So the lust of the flesh is the temptation to feel. That's passion. The lust of the eyes, that is the temptation to have. The temptation to have. I see it and I want it. I want that new car. I want that new corner office. I want that raise. I want that plaque. I want that recognition. I want. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and then thirdly, the pride of life is the temptation to be. The temptation to be. I want to be liked. I want to be loved. I want to be, you fill in the blank. I want to be famous. I want to be envied. I want to be worshiped. The pride of life is the temptation to be, and that is position. So we have this game plan. The lust of the flesh is the temptation to feel. That's passion. The lust of the eyes, that's the temptation to have. That's possessions. The pride of life, that's the temptation to be. That's position. And that's his game plan. Every advertisement you see appeals to one of those 3 things or more of them. Maybe sometime you ought to just sit back and watch TV and begin to start to identify, is that the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life commercial? Because then you'll be able to see the activity of the enemy in the world around you. And you'll be aware of Satan's game plan, because that leads us to number 3, and that is this: formulate a strategy beforehand on how to deal with temptation. Formulate a strategy beforehand how to deal with temptation. It's coming. You're going to face it. You may have faced it this morning. You may have faced it yesterday. You may have faced it this week, this past month, this past year. You may have only faced it once. You may have faced it once a day. You may have faced it a dozen times in a day. But know that it's coming and set a strategy ahead of time. What was that? I don't know. God, what'd you say? Speak a little clearer here. I was flipping through the channels the other day, and I stopped because it said Crave MAGA, and I don't know what that is. But they were showing this girl how to defend herself. And so I need a little help. Ryan, would you come up here? Ryan, would you come up here? All right. Get this out of the way. Well, wait a second. Wait till you see this, okay? All right, who wants to be the aggressor? You want to be the aggressor or you want to be the aggressor? Or let Ryan be the aggressor. No, I'm not a Crave MAGA. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right? But here's what the dude was doing, okay? So he was instructing this lady. You're going to be the lady, Ron, in this situation, but not because this is a men's only thing.
I'm about to
get
hurt, I can tell.
Well, you've got a knife, okay? So come over here for a second and put the knife. You right-handed or left-handed? Right-handed. Okay, so he's got a knife in his hand. He's getting ready to attack. Now, what this guy was saying is this. What you want to do, Ron, is you want to take his hand as he lunges towards you. And no, you don't want to do that. You want to take his hand and hit it aside. And then kick him in the knee and back up. All right? So you're coming at me. I want to knock that out of the way. I want to kick you in the knee, and then I'm backing up to get set. Or they taught you this other thing. It's amazing what you can see on TV in just 5 minutes. All right? Come at him with the left hand this time so more people can see, okay? Here's what's going to happen, all right? Instead of pushing it out of the way, kicking the knee and going, you're going to go into him, all right? So here's what's going to happen. Let's say this. Put it in your right hand. Come over here like this, all right? I want you to knock it down. Then you're going to come into him, and what you're going to do is you're going to grab his arm with your left hand. And notice this. What the woman did when she came in is she grabbed him. She got in tight. She put her right hand over his left shoulder tight, like you're dancing. Get in tight. Get in tight. Now, what the guy said is this is good, except for the fact that what Ryan can do then is go down here and pick him up and throw him back. Now, notice something, okay, guys? Stay with me. I want you to listen to something. Okay, get ready. Do this again. Knock his hand away. Knock his hand away. Go in close. Now, don't do this. Look, put your hand on his other shoulder. Put your elbow in between him. He cannot pick him up and move him. He can't do it. And the reason why I spend a few minutes to show you that is this. If you study this and you practice this, when it happens to you, you're ready. Formulate a strategy beforehand on how you will handle temptation when it comes. Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Thanks, guys. Let's break to the tables and have some discussion around the tables right now, shall we? Do me a favor, if you would, and grab your card. And I want to draw your attention to one verse as we wrap things up. I want to give you 3 truths about temptation as we wrap things up this morning. It's just good stuff for us to be aware of and know. Remember, we've already covered be mindful of where you're vulnerable, be watchful of temptation's game plan, and then formulate a strategy beforehand on how you're going to deal with temptation because you know it's going to come. But the last verse on your card today is 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 13. It says this: no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. And sometimes you think to yourself, I don't know if that verse is true. It is true. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. Let me give you 3 truths here real quick as we finish up, and then we're going to pray and we'll be done. Everyone faces temptation. There's no temptation that's taken you but such as is common to man. We all face similar temptations. But the enemy of our soul knows our weak spots, our blind spots. He knows what pushes our buttons. And an area of temptation for me may not be the exact same area of temptation for you. So sometimes we have a tendency to look at somebody and they've fallen into temptation and done wrong. We think to themselves, what's wrong with them? Couldn't they see that? But then in a different area in our life, they could say the same thing. Because it's a lot easier to see it in somebody else's life. That's why doing life together around the tables, doing life together outside of this room, holding each other accountable, communicating, encouraging, confronting is all a part of doing life together. So know this, everyone faces temptation. You will not lock eyes with a single person this day that does not deal with this. Number 2, temptation can and should be overcome in our lives. Temptation can and should be overcome in our lives. That's why we wanted to understand, wanted to pull the veil off of temptation's game plan so that we can begin to fortify our souls and organize our world and set up a parameter of protection. You know, the word guardrails just came up at our table a few moments ago. Guardrails are very important. Guardrails are not there to keep you from being able to get to your destination. Guardrails are not there to keep you from having fun. Guardrails are there to help you. There's great freedom in between the guardrails. But the guardrails are to keep you from falling off the cliff. And I would venture to say if we could take this mic and go around to every single guy in this room this morning, every one of us could come up with at least one example of a friend, a family member, a coworker who we know personally has fallen off of the cliff. And it's disastrous. So everyone faces temptation. Temptation can and should be overcome in our lives. And the third one is this, remember. God always provides an exit ramp. Remember, God always provides an exit ramp. Now, I've got an observation. I don't know if you have seen this. There's a lot of road construction going on around here. I can't go to church. I can't go to the grocery store. I can't go to work without some road construction along the way. It may be singularly fixing a pothole, or it may be, I don't know what they're doing. But you know what I would love? I wish I was the guy that invented the orange barrel. You know what I would do? I would be living someplace else and I'd fly in on Fridays to be a part of this because I would have had so much money. If I just made like $0.25 per barrel in the state of Georgia, I would be like a bazillionaire because they're everywhere. You know, it's like the official flower of Georgia is the orange barrel. And now, of course, I live in the north end of Forsyth County and go to church down in Buckhead. And we got to check ahead of time the news and the ways and everything else because they're doing this crazy thing. They make a nice new road and then they go back and they cut it up. And they station a policeman there and they tell you 3 wonderful, beautiful lanes are down to 1. And if you don't catch that exit ramp early enough, you're stuck, aren't you? Same thing when it comes to temptation. Look for the exit ramp. When you see the sign that says your life is getting ready to move down to one single lane and it ain't going to be pretty, get off. Take the ramp. Find another way. Temptation is very tempting. But you know it's coming. Everybody faces it. And you know God's always going to give you a way out. So let's use our brains. Let's pray. Let's use the word. Let's use the relationships God is building in us to stay clean. Father, each of us wrestles with temptations in its various form. Some are very similar, some are quite unique. But we have an enemy who we know his game plan, we know how he operates, but he is so efficient and so effective at it. I pray that it would be said of me and that it would be said of every man here. It would be said of every person who is watching the video that we understand his ways, we understand temptation, but we understand that God always, always, always provides an escape ramp. Lord, we're going to face temptation till the day we take our last breath. I pray that you'd help us to begin to gain victories day in and day out. We really do want to be godly men who make a difference for you in this world. And so I pray that you would enable us to, as Joseph did, no matter what the consequences may be, do the right thing. Help us not to wrestle with it. Help us to run. Help us not to sit and analyze it. Help us to refocus our attention on something new. But Lord, help us to understand your truth, the power of your Spirit in our lives, and help us to be different in order to make a difference for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you next Friday.
One Thing for Men meets at Cabernet Steakhouse in Alpharetta, Georgia on Friday mornings from 7 to 8 a.m. If you live in the Atlanta area or visit the area on Friday, we would love to have you join us in person. And if you have been blessed by this message, please consider supporting One Thing for Men online.